first little introduction to Juan. For those of you who are not deeply familiar, he's the inventor of IPFS and the founder of Protocol Labs and obviously Filecoin. Filecoin raised $200 million all the way back in 2017, when that was real money. And he was, I guess, the original DePIN project before DePIN even existed. And so it was actually functioning and working before the name even happened. And he studied computer science at Stanford before inventing and basically building and deploying IPFS. One other very important thing that he and Protocol Labs did was invest in Fluence. So very, very happy to have his support and be tied into the Filecoin and Protocol Labs ecosystem pretty closely. So I'm very happy to have Juan on stage to talk about his experiences in DePIN. So let's, Juan has talked about the history and the foundation of IPFS and the inventing of it many times before. So I think what we thought about for this talk was to go into a little bit more, kind of accelerate beyond that and get into some more specifics on DePIN and on IPFS and the problems, solutions, and that are relevant to that particular invention, and then also and then kind of abstract it to DePIN overall. So with that, I guess the first question would be, in inventing and building IPFS, what were some of the very hard problems that you discovered, solved, and potentially are still working on?
Yeah, and thanks for having me. Super excited to be here. It's very good to see the entire DePIN landscape evolve. When I first started on this in 2013, 2014, thinking about these ways of using cryptocurrency to evolve the stack, there was a very real uphill battle of talking to a lot of people about this new model, how it could work, and so on. I remember talking to a lot of the people that are now in the industry about it, who were like super skeptical, it's never going to work, and so on. And so it's been awesome to see the massive level of success, and it's been great to see so many networks now scale to tens of thousands to millions of people involved in various ways around the planet. I've seen many people uplifted out of poverty, actually, by being able to mine and participate in these networks, which is really, really important, a good way to bring digital infrastructure as a means to create better wealth globally, and a lot of services that are just getting better overall. Now, we have a huge gap between the systems that we have today and the consumer apps that we rely on every day. And if we want this whole model to work, we have to close that gap pretty aggressively and pretty quickly. And so I hope that what we talk about today and in the future DePIN-oriented talks can help a lot of the DePIN founders and product builders, and especially the people working on product and the engineers, to make really good decisions and move quickly to providing extremely good foundational products with the crypto layer underneath the hood. So with all that kind of out of the way, so IPFS, I'll dive a little bit into the thinking behind IPFS and Filecoin. There are two separate protocols for good reason. IPFS is a way of describing the addressing of information and the movement of information. So think of IPFS as an equivalent to HTTP. It's an HTTP designed for peer-to-peer interactions, for distributed interactions. You're able to describe web objects, so web pages, web applications, data, and so on, in a content address way, which means the addressing scheme refers to the fingerprint of the content, and that means you can find it anywhere in the network. So think of that as operating a little bit like BitTorrent and Git and so on, these distributed type systems, and think of the web being able to move around that way. And Filecoin is a separate incentive layer built to create a massive scale storage platform to be able to serve data in this DePIN-oriented way in the IPFS network. So think of Filecoin as an equivalent to Amazon S3 or Google Cloud or Cloudflare R2 and so on, and the other suite of products. So one of the things that we've seen evolve over the last few years in the Filecoin network is that when you think about storage and the storage of data for computation and whatnot, there's actually a host of little products on top. Well, not little products, huge products. S3, Glacier, R2, the CDNs. These are massive scale products that together form a very large scale storage and data delivery platform. And so Filecoin is as an ecosystem with with several networks tackling that entire problem at scale. And we build on the foundational layer of IPFS and then create that incentivized structure to be able to hire a network to store your data. I think some of the key problems that we solved include the classic how do you form a huge amount of supply. That the basic inspiration there is from Bitcoin and the block reward. That component is one of the earliest things in the entire crypto space. 2009 is when Satoshi and others built it. And that single mechanism, I think, is the most powerful mechanism in the entire crypto space and is way underused. So if you take away one thing for this entire conversation, you should take away that block rewards are extremely powerful, and you should use them to incentivize better things. The way that people use block rewards today is quite simplistic. It's part of why they work, but they can be extended a bit to improve all kinds of KPIs. And we'll see that happening with other networks. Filecoin uses them in a more sophisticated way. And we're even going to see Optimism start using this. So like the Optimism RetroPGF program is evolving from what it is now over time to incentivizing metrics and whatnot. So the block reward model is extremely, extremely powerful. Now, most people have tuned that for supply. There are probably ways to tune it for demand. We have not, as an industry, figured out how to do that correctly. That is a much harder problem than supply. But I would guess that whoever figures that out is going to be able to pave a fast way to scale up the demand side of DePIN networks. So yeah, there's one foundational thing. Maybe another foundational thing is the peer-to-peer versus peer-to-pool model that Guy was just talking about. That is a key foundational thing in DePIN networks as well. So the kind of peer-to-peer marketplace is a structure that a lot of systems need in order to or that's like the default naive model that you build up initially, but it has serious downsides and drawbacks because you have to create a market of participants and you have to think about pairwise transactions between them, and especially when the resource is not a super fungible commodity, you can't exchange it that easily. So you can't form the market that well, and there's all kinds of information friction happening. So much more successful models are to introduce a pool in between where clients are making deals with the network and providers are making deals with the network, and the network automatically matchmakes and moves and assigns the resource. Now, some networks find this model much easier. Some networks find it harder. I'll give a concrete example with Filecoin. So if you're starting small amounts of data and you want it highly geo-replicated, super easy to do the pool model, right? Like the client just stores with a specific set of endpoints for the pool, upload the data. The pool then takes a little chunk of data and distributes it out to whatever providers are gonna store it, copying it around a lot. Easy. That can work really, really well, and we've seen it work quite well in a number of projects and protocols around the Filecoin ecosystem. When you go into large-scale data and you want to move petabytes of data or exabytes, you're not talking about massive physical machines and moving around data. So you can't easily copy something many, many times. And so the pool model is way harder to get right because now specific clients need to know where to send the data. They probably need to interface human to human. And you have email involved and how do we get these massive drives to you? And so the pool model in that setting is way harder to get right. But it's totally doable. We've talked, the ecosystem now is converging into finding how to do that. And the pool model is very, very successful because it provides, in the way that Uniswap does, a one-sided style transaction. A client interacts with the network, the provider interacts with the network, and the market is formed automatically. You don't have to seek the pairwise structure. So I think that those are two very foundational components for most DePIN networks out there. And then the third one that I would add is just seek product market fit really aggressively. The entire crypto industry is, because of it's so financialized so quickly, and these are really powerful tools, a lot of teams end up building things that are just very quickly become overly financialized. And because of a lot of reasons, including the frictions in the ecosystem, certain kinds of projects, think of all the meme coins and whatnot, can grow super fast, super easily with low friction, and the harder, more foundational actually create an enormous amount of value by building utility projects, all of the DePIN projects, have a harder, more uphill battle in terms of the friction. But you have to think, 2, 5, 10 years ahead, what is going to create massive amounts of value? Where is most of the value in infrastructure today? And it's these huge utilities that provide super valuable services around the planet, generating hundreds of billions of dollars of cash flow. And that's what the entire DePIN industry is chasing. It's not small potatoes meme coins. It's going after hundreds of billions of dollars that add up to trillions in utility value. It's just that we haven't figured out how exactly to get it just right to then really beat the massive scale monopolies that are entrenched deeply and do not want us to come in and disrupt them, right? So that's the promise. And so these projects have to be extremely focused on product market fit and figuring out how to adapt their networks to meet the demands of various clients and users around the world, and know that many users of these utilities do not want to touch crypto, do not want to think about having to exchange tokens and whatnot. So as Guy was saying, you need an adapter between the Web3 layer and the Web2 world. And this is fairly easy to build. You build a single corporation on top of the network that can provide that service. Maybe you can afford to have one or a few in the network as an entry point. Or if it's a geolocated service, think of potentially creating an environment where there's regional companies that are able to provide that adapter, right? So think of the sharing economy and how the ride-sharing service industry got super fragmented because there's all kinds of local structures that are different, and certain players got a network effect in a particular environment faster than others. And so today you go around the world, and in some places you use Uber, in some places like here you use Grab, in other places you use Lyft. There's a whole bunch of different sharing economy networks. And so it's possible that some of these protocols can give rise to multiple adapter companies, but that model is very nascent. I think Helium was mentioned as using it, WeatherXM is using it, Filecoin is using it with Web3 storage, and now Sriracha and Akavis networks. So I think that kind of model of building a foundational protocol and then building adapter interfaces is extremely powerful and enables you to build match product market fit much faster. So anyway, I've been rambling now for 10 plus minutes. Hopefully that was useful. But yeah, anything else you?
We have time for one more question. No, just kidding. I think there are three points there, right? So we've got the block rewards, which is critical point one, then peer-to-peer, peer-to-pool, which is another point, and then product market fit, platform, product, how that works, right? So I think we'll have time to dive into two of those in detail, but potentially three. So first, let's go in that order you mentioned them, because I think it's really interesting. So block rewards, obviously important. We see that as powerful for incenting supply in DePIN networks. That I think hasn't been the issue. Demand, which you sort of referenced in the last bit, and sort of product owner fits the last bit. Can you talk about maybe token economics for a second? One thing we've been seeing in newer DePIN projects is buy and burn, where revenue that comes to the network buys token, burns it, and that's not exactly the product market fit concept you're talking about, but it is a model that is, I think, more of a newer generation for more of the physical DePIN network as opposed to the cloud ones, because they maybe interact more directly with customers and not peer-to-peer. So how would you think about either in context of Filecoin, token economics, what drives value, or how do you think about those things broadly?
Yeah, so great question. So a few thoughts here. One is, a lot of people think of the block reward as just an early stage incentive model to just form the network that is supposed to go away. And that's because the Bitcoin papers sort of described it that, or the Bitcoin community sort of described it that way. And we, the Filecoin community, and maybe me personally, described it as a subsidy and so on. And so we kind of confused everyone a bit with that notion. You have to think of the block reward as a persistent emission schedule that is giving, it's the revenue stream of the providers. And if you connect that block reward, which is paying a set of providers for participation, and you model that as the pool paying the providers, what you now need to do is connect the other side of the equation, which is the clients need to pay the pool. So that's where the buy and burn model that you described works, where you can have a company charging in some normal fiat currency in the world, translating into the token, purchasing the token, and then burning it, and that's the consumptive use. And so you have a consumption on one side and emission on the other side, and that forms the successful value loop. My claim, and I think we'll see this bear out over the next 5 to 10 years, is that the networks that get this balance right are going to generate massive amounts of value around the world, and that the emission schedules that are persistent over time and that connect with the pool model are going to way outperform other kind of transaction fee processing things, because the block reward is just so powerful as an incentive structure to reward participation in a very, very rigorous way. And so I think concretely, and I think here I'll definitely plug a one of the projects that I'm most excited about, which is Glow, where Glow is using that exact same model to try and scale solar farm production around the planet. It's basically saying, hey, climate change is a huge problem. Let's solve this. Crypto is a tool for global coordination, and we've seen the massive scale success with Bitcoin, Filecoin, and many other networks. Let's try and scale solar as fast as possible using the block reward. And it's effectively happening now. Like, it's growing quite a bit. In fact, David Vorik gave a great talk on this exact same thing, exact topic. I think at a prior DePIN Day, maybe earlier this year.
In Brussels, I think.
Yeah, either the Brussels or the Denver one, where he talks about the value flows and very crisply and clearly describes how you as a DePIN creator or builder need to think about the value flows, connecting it to the token value, where the rewards purchase some resource, the resource is spent to create some value for the customers, and the customers need to connect that to the protocol. I'll give a couple other tactical things that you can do here. One is introducing protocol fees, where clients, as they use the service, can just pay directly in a protocol fee. This is good for on-chain native applications. And another is to, I think this is not yet tried, but I think it'll probably be tried in the future, is find a way of measuring the usage of the network and then charging some proportional value. It's kind of the inverse of the block reward. It's like you pay proportionally to what you use relative to the entire network. I think this model has the best likelihood of exactly balancing the emission and the client-side use, but I think it's harder to model it right for the client side, and so this is why I think nobody has quite done it. But I think if somebody does that, I think it could be super, super powerful. And I'll plug out, if you are a DePIN founder or interested in this problem space, please turn your attention to how do you incentivize a massive scale network of participants onboarding demand into these networks. How do you turn that into a good game theoretic construction where you can use tokens to incentivize and approach high quality results? I'll give you a really good hint answer, which is that learn from the sharing economy. The sharing economy now perfected incredible products around the planet by the clever use of star ratings. Star ratings are a super basic, simple, well-tried tool, and they power massive scale infrastructure networks, and they have produced incredibly high quality products and services today. And so perhaps you can combine star rating constructions with some kind of token emission schedule to coordinate a mass scale set of sales processes and onboarding into the network. So, exercise for the watcher out there to build that.
It's certainly interesting. I think related to what you just mentioned, though, is community. And you guys have obviously built a terrific community. It's global, it's engaged, and it has kind of both sides. People using, obviously, you have a whole miner community. So can you talk a little bit to founders about the resources you devote to the community? How did you start? Any recommendations and thoughts on building and attracting that?
Yeah, and here I would say the word community sometimes, especially in the kind of Web 2 world, is sort of seen as, hey, there's the product builders over here, and they're defining the thing, and then the community is over there. That is not the case in Web 3. In Web 3, the community is the network. The network is a set of participants building the thing, providing the service for the thing, using the thing, developing the thing, marketing the thing, everything. So you have to start with the network, start with the community. How do you construct a good environment for the community globally? You have to reason through all of the different kinds of stakeholders that you might have. You have to think about the relationship between those stakeholders in the network, the relationship between those stakeholders and each other, and create good models for how their participation is positive sum. I'll give you a concrete example with Filecoin. So Filecoin early on, we wrote a paper that talked about introducing the Filecoin economy. You can find it online. There's a PDF. In it, you will find a diagram that describes 5 key stakeholder groups in the Filecoin network. The clients, the storage providers, which at the time were called miners, the clients, storage providers, developers, and this includes core developers of the protocol, developers of applications or services in the protocol, and end user developers that are going to use the protocol to build applications, token holders, which are participants in the network that provide financial capital to the system, and that are effectively the participants and users of the system, and ecosystem partners, which are key organizations that can help bring lots of things that are harder for a crypto network to summon into the system. So you can think of this as a wide range of participants that are partners to the network. So think of hardware providers, right? Think of like the NVIDIA's and in Filecoin's case, think of Seagate and Western Digital and other disk providers, data center providers, and so on. So between these 5 stakeholder groups, you can think about the relationships between them and the relationships from them to the network. And if you get those flows right and you create a positive sum game as much as possible between these, you get a network that will grow. And so practically just think about each of these stakeholder groups, model the interactions, produce a good and high quality environment, and then start seeding the network by building good entry points for those groups and measure how well you're doing and optimize. Meaning, if you measure how well you're doing with each of these stakeholder groups and you have a valve to get feedback as a community, if you have a way of getting feedback from each of the stakeholder groups, they will tell you what works or doesn't work. They will tell you what they would like to see and have a way of sorting between those and implement successful improvements for each of those stakeholder groups. So I think with some basic adaptation of the processes that traditional normal centralized companies use for great product development and great product optimization, you can take those same kinds of feedback optimization tools and create decentralized equivalents of those that measure how well you're doing and tell you what you should do to optimize. And then as a community, you know what you should go and do. Most of the conflicts and problems that I see in communities stem from not thinking through this kind of stuff well enough or not acting on it fast enough. And especially when there are like value flows that are in conflict with each other, where there are different conflicting ways to generate value that are opposed to each other. That ends up generating huge strife in communities. We've seen a lot of that across a bunch of networks. And also when things are negative sum or zero sum, those environments I think are like fairly bad. So you want to just kind of remove those kinds of structures as much as possible and orient to participation should be as positive sum as you can possibly make it. And if you do that, you'll create something that grows really quickly in a bunch of directions.
So recognize those different constituencies, identify, measure, and get feedback, which sounds certainly reasonable.
You get what you measure. Like I want to super stress this point because I think people don't do it enough. The stuff that's on chain is easy to measure, and we had very good, decades of building blockchain explorers that told us a bunch of stuff, so we were able to adapt that. And then somehow product developers forget that, and then when they think about all kinds of other critical things about the network that are not on chain, they just don't measure those. And so you have all of these networks that are flying blind on how their infrastructure and systems are doing because we don't have a way of understanding what's happening and weaving that into metrics and dashboards. So if you do one thing well is instrument the network really well and provide all of that visibility into the entire network in a fully decentralized way. You should have on-chain metrics that yield dashboards that anyone can generate or view about every major indicator of your network, not just the stuff on the resources and the supply side, but things like the developer community, how well certain things work. For each of the stakeholder groups, what matters in those KPIs.
Shifting gears back to product versus platform in a way. We've seen platforms develop across the crypto ecosystem overall, starting with L1s, right? And you can even look at Bitcoin as a platform. Recent DePIN projects have been very product focused, where they're actually building the actual product that they are they're themselves selling. And I think of those more in the physical DePIN side as opposed to sort of the cloud digital side. So you mentioned earlier, that gave the ride sharing concept of platforms versus that can be potentially deployed elsewhere. How do you think about it, whether for Filecoin or others, the platform concept versus the build a specific team building a product and productizing the offer?
Yeah, so a platform is a product, but the product is not serving the end users. It's serving the builders and developers of the next layer, right? And so when you're building a platform, you need to both build the platform and the entry points, which are the different products that end users are going to end up using. And those end users usually segment out to different kind of markets. In the ride-sharing economy example that I gave, those different markets are location-oriented. There's different geographies with different rules, different structures, different cities. Here in Grab, you have a very different suite of products than in, New York. And by the way, please wear helmets. Oh man, go look up the damn mortality rates in Thailand with motorcycle accidents. second highest in the world, just so you know. Anyway, crazy. You know, Thailand one-shots the entire crypto industry. Or I guess Grab in this case, not Thailand. Anyway, sorry, I got distracted by that. I just have seen so many like irresponsible risk-taking. So you have these markets that can be location-oriented and distribute different geographies and whatnot. You can also have markets that segment out by different style of products. So in the Filecoin example that I gave, you have things like object storage is one type of product. Large-scale data storage and onboarding is a different type of product. Chain storage is a different product. Content delivery networks are a different product. So those different products are the concrete entry points for end users. And then Filecoin is a large-scale system, needs to be able to have good solutions for all of these. And those, by the way, we have a good framework for them, which is to build those as separate and connected networks. The Filecoin network is now jumping into that environment now and being pretty successful with it.
Excellent. Let's talk about DePIN for a second. Where do you see DePIN use coming from consumers, from enterprises, from all the above? Paint the next sort of 12 to 24 months as sort of DePIN ecosystem, whether it's digital or physical.
So there's a lot of usage of DePIN in a bunch of places. What I would say is you have to solve a problem very well for a large customer set. And here there's just standard, tried and true, good advice about building good products. Build something people want. And so with that, today, in the things that I have visibility over, there's a whole set of digital tools that things like Filecoin and others that are entirely aimed at people building applications or other networks and so on. And those are in Web3 building for Web3 tends to work pretty well, but Web3 is pretty small still, so like it's not a big market. You want to grow that market over time, and so you want to be in that market and succeed in that market so that you grow with it, but it's not that big of a market. The normal Web2 world is dramatically larger, and there I think we're starting to see the first DePIN networks that are doing well with the traditional market. I think here I will plug, again, things like Glow that can sell the energy directly into grids. Like that's an easy way to plug into a market that already exists. Hive Mapper and protocols like this that generate huge amount of data that can then be sold to specific businesses. WeatherXM, who's like creating a bunch of weather data and then can be sold into an existing market for weather data and forecasts. And so you want to not reinvent the wheel in product development in the Web2 world. You want to fit and adapt to existing markets wherever possible. Most end users just don't know that their resource is being served by a Web3 network in most cases, and like that's a fine thing. Like it's like most people don't know that HTTP runs Uber underneath the hoods, and that's fine. But in Web3, that's where the growth really goes into solving large-scale problems for chains and for different kinds of protocols and markets. And again, those are still very small, but should grow with time. So I think as a platform builder, you kind of have to do a bit of both. You have to think through how the existing markets work and where your revenue needs to come from today, but you have to also build towards the future where Web3 is going to scale and going to be much larger.
Excellent. Well, listen, we are over time, unfortunately, but we could keep asking Juan questions. I think I'm going to have him on the podcast. So if you have any questions that you want me to ask him on DePIN, let me know. But let's give a round of applause for Juan. Thank you.
Thanks.